This week, the Human Services Department came under fire once again as it moved forward with plans to turn over management of 15 behavioral health providers to companies from Arizona. HSD suspended Medicaid payments to those same agencies, and the Attorney General's office is investigating the allegations. So joining us on the Aligned Opinion panel to talk about this and other topics, our good friend Martha Burke, host of the radio show Equal Time with Martha Burke, heard on KSFR in Santa Fe. Whitney Waite, principal of the Waite Company here in Albuquerque's Nob Hill. Former New Mexico House Republican Whip Daniel Foley returns this week, and John Wertheim, former chairman of the Democratic Party of New Mexico. John, let me start with you. You were on several weeks ago when this story first started to bubble up to the surface. You made a couple of very interesting comments at that time about how this all came to be. Now, coming forward to now, the Attorney General, it's now in his hands and our state auditor. Let's talk about the Attorney General first, Gary King. Your sense of how he's handling this, he's constricted by some federal law on this, but is there anything in your mind he could be doing right at this point to add or take away from the conversation at this point?
I actually think that he's doing the right thing. I think what the Medicaid fraud unit needs to do is investigate these allegations of fraud.
Right.
I do think that I wish the HSD had handled it differently. I think there's a kind of a partisan divide that is developing, and it's unfortunate. We need to focus on continuity of care for the patients of these behavioral health services. These are mental health services. These are addiction services. They're very important for New Mexico. And so I think we've lost a little bit of a focus. I think Judge Armijo in the court battle that's been ensuing emphasized that in her ruling, that regardless of what she's going to do as a judge, she's really trying to focus on that continuity of care issue. And so I'm hoping that we can kind of back off on this becoming a partisan divide.
Is the horse out of the barn on that? I mean, he's running for governor. I mean, you know.
Yeah, my personal view is that I agree with some of the critics of the administration that said that the administration could have taken a much more moderate stance. Okay. They could have said, look, there could be some serious problems here. We want to take some time and investigate them and not make any precipitous decisions. That's really what the critics of the administration have been saying. Well, that decision was made, and they're trying to blame the Affordable Care Act, so-called Obamacare, for forcing their hand. I've looked at the law and regulations related to that. I don't agree that it forces that, but that's going to be a debate. Republicans are going to say that President Obama made us do it, and I think more cool minds are going to say, no, that's not the real issue.
Let's you threw something on the table that's interesting about where Republicans are coming from. Dan, do you have a take on that very point right there? Is there something about this that has become partisan to a point where it's not turning back? Or?
I don't think so. I think there's people who want it to be. I think John wants it to be. You know, you have the Attorney General. The last time I checked, he's not a registered Republican. You have a federal judge. Last time I checked, she wasn't appointed by a Republican and is a Republican.
She was,
but she's not a Republican. And so, you know, you've got folks out there that are making these rulings. All the legal beagles, from the HSD to everybody else out there at the federal level, all agrees with the way this has been handled. But John, the former chairman of the Democratic Party, has a different read of the law. I think the fact is that we have a real difference in how we handle these. The former administration had this happen to them in the Housing Authority scandal, and they handled it slowly. They moved slowly. People lost their homes. Businesses went out of business, and nothing ever happened. The federal law says once you have a legitimate claim of fraud, you got to stop. This is not pennies. Stop funding these people. You have to stop the money.
No,
it does say that, and the judge ruled that. I mean, see, this is where it gets partisan, because you have a federal court that ruled this. You have the Attorney General, the Albuquerque Journal. You have CNN reporting on unbelievable amounts of fraud just like this around the country. And at the end of the day, it's really and what I think gets a little frustrating for us as Republicans, and me, and I think for Governor Martinez, is we start talking about the mental health issue. There's nobody closer to that issue than Governor Martinez. And that's not because she chooses to be there. She was placed there with the care of her sister. And so people say that she doesn't understand what this is doing. She understands extremely well. She understands up to $35 million has disappeared, and that's care that's not being delivered.
Allegedly.
Yes, allegedly disappeared. Right. That's not care that's being delivered. That's a problem.
Okay, and another problem potentially, Martha Burke, is the fact that we've already spent $3 million of taxpayer money to suss that out, but the background of this company shows in other states, particularly North Carolina, there's a pattern here of something that doesn't quite jibe. What's your take on this?
Well, I think it's a setup from start to finish between HSD, the private companies, and they want to privatize government services. That's not anything new. North Carolina's auditor has said that the audit there was very, very flawed. They initially said, these so-called auditors, that there was over $1 million in fraud and so forth. It came down to 22,000
in one particular case,
yeah,
right?
in one particular case. And my friend here is wrong about what the law says. The law says they can freeze the funds, but they don't have to.
Okay.
If there's good cause not to, such as loss of services, you're not sure whether the audit is going to be proven accurate or not, they don't have to freeze the funds, and that is in the law. But I want to get back to the Attorney General just a minute, because there is a case that is not in the current 15 that has been pending before the Attorney General for over a year and a half. He has done nothing, despite being begged to go ahead with the investigation because they put the provider out of business. It was a small business compared to these 15, and flatly put her out of business because the Attorney General would not move on this referral from HSD. I'm concerned that he's going to mess around until the election cranks up, and we'll never know the end.
I'm glad you brought that up, because Whitney, even the Journal opined on that very thing, saying the editorial, the public deserves the HSD audit it paid for. And it went on to say a very good point, that the Rebecca Vigil-Herone case, she did not get a speedy trial. The whole thing was kind of frittered away at that point. Do you share that frustration perhaps with Martha, that we won't get to the bottom of this
No,
in time?
I think the Attorney General is going to be all over it, because now all the pressure's in his lap to do it. And the Journal did back off of their original assessment in the editorial that they ran today. You know, the left and the right can go back and forth as to whether or not they think the law says that they should or should not or could not have cut off that funding. The administration's position is that as soon as they became aware of what were very serious allegations of fraud and potential of fraud within these companies, they had to turn it over to investigate. The governor's office does not do investigations. They turned it over to the Attorney General. At that point, the Attorney General said, yes, we think that there's enough evidence here for us to investigate. At the point in time when the Attorney General said, we're going to investigate, then the administration was required by law to cut off that funding. That's the difference. So left and right can go back and forth, but this administration does believe that they were under federal law to do it. And plus, it's really important to point out that the auditor, the company that they brought in, is an approved auditor by the Obama administration. So, you know, to have so many Democrats in the state, you know, criticizing the choice of the auditing company.
They're approved by the administration to do what exactly?
To
exist?
audit,
To exhaust? I mean, they're part of.
To do these audits, it's through the GSA. It's through
I'm not sure what the point is, though.
This
I mean,
audit is for the feds.
Sure,
And so they
absolutely.
chose auditors that are approved by the federal government, which is the administration there is not run by Republicans. So these people were vetted by the Obama administration in D.C. and said, choose from this list of auditors. They chose
I'll go
one.
one further too. The woman who's in charge of the group, and I forget the name of it right now, that actually went ahead and identified the auditors was one of the former cabinet secretary for Governor Richardson. So, you know, this is not a partisan issue in this. They're looking into Medicaid fraud all across the country, 20
I hear you.
different states.
Let's talk about this. I just got under a minute here, but quickly around the table. The idea that you can have privately owned companies that are taking federal money, but in effect, just the government telling them you're out of business, and these other out-of-state people are now taking over your business.
That's not what this is about.
That seems like a
That's not what this is about.
The
Let me
Arizona
finish the
companies
point.
are private, the state companies
I understand
are
that,
private.
Whitney, but it just feels like a fantastically anti-business
Not at all,
way
Gene.
for a Republican administration
Gene, but
to approach
I got to
business.
stop you, Gene. That is wrong, because it's about an alleged
But
accusation.
who gets
Let me
to
finish.
choose these six
It's about
companies?
an alleged.
I don't
It's
understand
about
that.
an alleged allegation of $35 million of money that should be going to treat the most needy people of our society. It's about getting them the services they need. Just like Martha said, continuation of coverage, getting people in there that can do the job. That's what this is about. And people want to turn it into some partisan witch hunt. $35 million is a ton of money in
And
New
that's
Mexico.
money
We don't
that
know if
would have
that's
been
true or
going
not.
to
We don't know if that's
well,
true or
that's
not.
why they're investigating.
I
If you
understand.
receive
But
federal dollars
guys,
to
hang on a
provide
second.
programs.
We're a little bit over time here. But to my point, how do you take over private businesses as government
not a
entities?
private
and
business. Taking
say,
it
All they're
over.
doing
You're
is shoving
out,
off
you're
the
in.
funding.
That's not what they're doing.
Look,
They
of
can
course
still
it's
what they're
No,
doing.
Gene, they
Of
can
course it's what
operate. They
they're
can
doing.
operate
Yeah, the
out in the
Arizona
private
companies
sector
have
all they
taken over
want.
the employees
They-
of
they
a
can-
number of
Taking
them.
over anything.
Yes, they
have.
They
All right,
receive federal
unfortunately,
funds.
I got
That
into
means
it a
that
little
they
bit
have
late.
to
I
account for it
apologize.
properly.
We're going to handle this more off air. Maybe we'll put some extra stuff on the internet. We'll see what happens. Now, in a moment, we're back to talk same-sex marriage with two couples suing the state.